Good morning, people. Good morning, traders and listeners and anyone that's keeping an eye on markets, etc., etc. This is the Morning Blast. It is Tuesday, the 24th of March, all day. You join myself, Ryan, and of course, Michael, for a very candid takedown on markets. As usual, nothing we say on this podcast is trading or investment advice. We try and put a bit of value onto your day, put a smile on your face. We do not apologize for tangents that may be taken, expletive-filled rants, etc., etc. Take us as you find us. Michael, how the devil are you?
Well, very good morning to you, Ryan. Good morning, everyone. A very happy Tuesday. I think it's safe to say that everyone is just a little tiny, teeny bit more optimistic this morning than they were yesterday. I think it's probably fair to say.
Yeah, well, obviously we'll come on to this very shortly, but obviously there's a lot went on yesterday and a lot of head scratching and finger pointing, etc.
Yes,
I think one thing we can take away, and again we will cover this in more detail slightly later, is that, why do you need, we were talking yesterday about, there doesn't appear to be any off ramps unless Trump just invents his own off ramp. And he appears to have invented an off ramp. So I think we caught reasonably well. We just didn't have a clue when or where and how. But yeah,
which is about as much idea as anyone else has, by the way. So,
pardon, sorry?
Which is about as much or as little idea as anyone else has, it must be said.
I would suggest that maybe some, and we'll come on to this slightly later, some certain people that may have traded slightly before a certain tweet, a True Social post, might have had an idea what's going on, but more on that in a second. We're not casting aspersions here. There's innocent until proven guilty. That is something that
we better not. We'll have lawyers on our case.
Well, exactly. And, as you know, I'm a big fan of innocent until proven guilty.
Give me the fucking technical.
Moving swiftly on. Right. Where am I? Technical.
Clive, save us.
Save us. Clive. Right, Clive. Clive's to the rescue. Right. Clive Lambert's future text updates. Yeah, okay. Right, what's he saying? Hello, Clive. Big moves yesterday on Trump's early morning musings, bulk tweets. Yeah, I am, to be honest, I am absolutely certain he tweeted that from the shitter, but that's just me. S&P rallied to 67.48 where sellers returned. Well, sellers returned because the Iranians said it was bullshit. 66.75 was the first reference on the gains today. DAX posted a green piercing pattern candle, or 22.
I think he's making these up.
To be honest, we've both got his book next to us, and we both could check, but we both won't.
Yeah, that's very true. The thing is, knowing Clive, he knows he could easily wind us up with some of these by just dropping in a few fake patterns and candle names, and God only knows whatever else.
Oh, absolutely. As I said to him when I saw him on Friday, he could write anything in this, and I'd read it out. I'm like Anchorman when he's reading the prompter. Where was I? Yes, so the piercing pattern candle in the DAX, 22,644 is the Marabouzu support tested this morning already, and it held at the time we went to print or recording, whatever you want to call it. FTSE futures still below 10,000, and the 200-day simple moving average is down at 96.30, so we put some distance on that. Bund futures saw green but fell twice at 126.03 to 05, so that's one to watch. Long gilt futures, they also rallied off the 12-year low set yesterday morning. 88.90 and 89.09 is a big resistance on any further recovery. In Forex, we saw some dollar weakness, euro dollar getting up to 1.1640. Bitcoin rallied as well up to 71,800. Still shy of that 74,500 level. I've remembered that myself. That's not even on Clive's piece of paper, so back for Ryan there. That's how many times I say that fucking level. Gold, the yellow metal.
Bit of a difference.
Oh gosh, it's so well. Gold.
It's been a long week.
And silver in some style. They recovered both in some style. Gold rallied to 4,100 overnight yesterday to retake its 200-day simple moving average at 4,144. Way! As well as a couple of Fibonacci levels at 42.40 and 42.60 to leave a hammer on the daily. Candles, that is. Silver also posted a hammer after rallying on hitting a big Fibonacci level at 61.56. Ditto, platinum, palladium posting hammers at key support levels to give bulls some hope. So pretty much in the pressures, it's hammer time. Way!
Oh dear.
That's my joke.
As long as you don't start singing.
No, I promise I'll save that for you later.
Mm.
What was I saying? Base metals also saw some green. LME, zinc, and aluminium. Easy for me to say. Both bouncing from key support levels. Brent crude sold off to 96.00. We're watching a Fibonacci support level at 96.28 in Brent. So that's something for the bulls to build on, despite being a big bearish engulfing pattern. Although we have to say, as much as we love Clive, all bets are off with technical analysis at the moment on energy markets, is my humble opinion. And the fact that I got an email from Clive, official email from Clive, basically saying he's torn up writing his weekly crude reports or energy technical analysis, because what's the point, was his words. Yeah, so fair. I think not just Clive, but I think spare a thought, and I did tweet this yesterday, for any market analysts or market reporters trying to write stuff at the moment, because when they write stuff, unless they're self-employed like Clive, it has to go through a compliance check. It has to be scheduled to be published and stuff like that. It's not necessarily instantly published. And those 5 minutes must be a long fucking wait for you, Michael, bearing in mind that everything could turn around in that time.
Well, funnily you mentioned that, because mercifully I don't have to get through compliance. It's more a sort of, just get signed off afterwards once it's gone live. But I was literally 30 seconds away from publishing something along the lines of, the market is increasingly looking at a slightly more drawn out and protracted conflict, and how we're starting to see that be priced in various places. And it was, hovering over the publish button when I suddenly looked up at the screen and went, why has risk gone bid? And then hastily decided that I wouldn't publish that anymore, because the entire situation had flipped on its head on the back of one True Social post.
Well, and the fact is, though, you still might be right. But there we go. But look.
Well, yeah, quite. But I'd have had quite a lot of egg on my face if I had still published it at that point.
No, true that. Just finishing off with Clive, TTFs, the European gas, saw red, but was fairly muted compared to other markets. As Clive mentioned yesterday, why is TTF not believing that that True Social post? Because it didn't really move as much as Brent was up. Mainly because the gas market will take a long time to spin back up, even if there was a peace agreement signed tomorrow. The gas situation, specifically heading to Asia and Europe, is still a really, really grim outlook because of the Qatar is going to take to spin up.
What's it priced in, though, Ryan?
Euros TTF.
Very good, well done.
There you go. Well, but TTF 57.21 is above downside risk in the short term. That's where you're looking at. EU carbon markets all green again yesterday after Friday's reversal, but needs a 70 handle to think any more bullish thoughts. Thank you very much for Clive on that. And also shout out to Clive. Whilst I am trying to read this, and whilst we do speak on this, he does live WhatsApp us. I do keep telling him, just chat in the fucking live chat on the podcast. It means I've got one less thing to try and keep an eye on.
Well, I do agree that I would say, though, it depends what he's going to say, because some of the sentences is very much not suitable for the live chat.
Sorry, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. Actually, Clive, stick to WhatsApp, mate. It's fine.
Yes. Anyway, yesterday, well, let me read out what President Trump said, and then we can get our teeth into exactly what was going on, because it was about 11 o'clock London time yesterday morning, of course, 7 o'clock on the east coast of the States, when we got a Truth Social post from President. Well, potentially, I'd rather not have that mental image, but it came from President Trump, no matter where he was sat, and it read that he is pleased to report on what he called very good and productive conversations with Iran regarding a complete and total resolution of hostilities in the Middle East. As a result of that progress that had been made, President Trump said that he would be postponing strikes on energy and power plants within Iran for a 5-day period. Of course, these were the strikes that could have been the result of that ultimatum that Trump issued over the weekend regarding basically 48 hours to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or I will hit your domestic power infrastructure. It appears, well, it doesn't appear, it has. It is the case that has been postponed for 5 days, although it is worth noting.
So this just goes as far as to say, also, I did see something was hit yesterday, but regarding power overnight. But let's just say officially that kind of timeline is still in place. Let's kind of try and choose our wording a little better.
Well, if you hadn't interrupted me, I was going to carry on, because actually.
Okay. Okay.
Because actually, even Trump himself said that time period will be subject to what he called the success of ongoing meetings and discussions. So you are correct to say that it is still a fluid situation. I think the other sort of two caveats that I would pull out from that are, firstly,
we love a good pull-out story. Go on.
God. Firstly, is that the post from President Trump only mentions power plants and energy infrastructure. So logically, you would assume that strikes on other targets are likely to continue, whether that be military or political infrastructure or whatever it may be. The language was very specific regarding energy and power and not anything else. And also the other thing that kind of goes without saying, and you obviously alluded to this earlier on, is that this doesn't really change the situation in the Strait of Hormuz immediately. That is still essentially impassable. There have been a few stories of various LNG tankers making their way through and on their way to India, but by and large, Hormuz is still essentially blocked. However, I think that the big thing from this is that 24 days into the conflict, I believe we were yesterday, it is the first even inkling, little kind of chink of light at the end of the tunnel, first sign of any desire to de-escalate things from the Trump administration.
Yeah, sorry, let's just get myself arranged.
What on earth was that?
Right.
That was very peculiar, even for you.
Even for me. Just something, again, no one really has a clue what the fuck's going to happen today, tomorrow, let alone in a week's time. One thing I would flag, just to be a bit of a devil's advocate to what Michael's been saying, is that it wouldn't be unusual, it wouldn't be unexpected, should we say, if this just turned out to be Trump's measures. What I mean is Trump's measures were kind of being used to almost stall or delay and kind of reduce the kind of the immediate concern from Iran in order to get ducks aligned, such as we are seeing troop movements and like Marines and kind of expeditionary forces and stuff being kind of like heading that way. Think back to Venezuela. There was a lot of assets being put in place. There was a lot of, things are going well. We're talking to them. They understand the situation, but we're still sending people in that area. And then lo and behold, overnight, everything all kicks off. I'm not saying that is the base case. I'm just flagging it as a concern and something that we should be aware of. And it's when we look at what they're looking to do. So we spoke last week about someone mentioned Israeli boots on the ground. Now that's not going to happen. Let's be absolutely honest about it. Obviously egg on my face now I've said it, but
thanks for that.
If it's there, if Israeli boots go on the ground, I'll give you the money myself. But what we could see is potentially American boots on, say, like Karg Island or something like that, because it has already been softened up. It is where Iran are still getting pretty much all their money from oil exports to go into India and China and whatnot. Also just a reminder, in case people, I'm sure everyone has seen a map of the Strait for long enough now. The Karg Island isn't exactly in the Strait. It's just kind of, it's inside that, inside the sea there from the Strait. So it's kind of
a very long way in as well. Actually.
It's like 300 miles or something like that.
Yeah, something. It's not a case of, you could just meander into the Strait of Hormuz and you fall onto Karg Island. I did see
some kind of tourists come in and say, you take Karg Island, that means the Strait is solved. It's not. Karg Island is separate from the Strait. Let's make that very clear. The Strait is the transit point that everyone needs to go past, which is the choke point. Karg Island is just where Iran basically prints all its money from. So, this makes sure there is a distinct difference here. But turning off the money printer, which is Karg Island, would be something that would really kind of maybe apply a lot of leverage, but then you don't know what the Iranians are going to do in return for that if that was the case. But look, let's just keep all options on the table. And as traders, we do need to have all options in our mind and know how we're going to react to that. And quite frankly, I think that's a point that needs to be raised more often is, it's one thing trying to sit there and trying to trade headlines when you see them and then like see a headline and try and work out what to trade. The best headline traders I know, and these are guys that you really don't want to be competing with. They've been doing it a long, long time. And they are much faster than any of you lot. Unfortunately, I'm just being blunt and truthful here. They kind of already have in their head, or not kind of, they do have in their head a situation and what the trade is for pretty much any possible headline or major headline that comes down the market. They all, like most of them, already have a hotkey set up to trade exactly the level, the amount of contracts they want to do in each market simultaneously. That's for kind of multiple situations. They're not looking at a headline and going, oh shit, that must mean I've got to buy crude, or that means I've got to sell this or buy that. They're not even, that thought process isn't even there. It's almost like muscle memory for them. And this is why it's so difficult to compete with that lot, and why you are exit. If you're listening, if you're a retail trader and you see a headline, then you try and jump on IG or whatever, or Pepperstone, obviously, you are exit liquidity, because in those couple of seconds, the market's already moved, and people are saying thank you very much for that quick win. So that's just something else to be aware of. Also, we've got to talk about, obviously, this Truth Social posts. We've got to talk about that smelly trade, the smelly trades that went through the markets a little bit before this all kicked off. So, like, the FT are reporting that between six.
Well, actually, sorry, before we do that, can we just, it is worth mentioning the response that we had to Trump's Truth Social post, because
absolutely,
that was a bit of a mess in and of itself. Now, again, there's a hell of a lot of mixed messages, and I'm not convinced that anyone really knows exactly what's going on. So Trump himself obviously put out that post saying that they'd have productive conversations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He then spoke to the media on a couple of occasions yesterday. Firstly, when he was getting on Air Force One, he was talking about how they'd been speaking to the Iranians on, I believe, Saturday evening and Sunday evening US time. He also then kind of repeated that again in some remarks that he was giving later on in Graceland, of all places, which was the home of Elvis Presley. God only knows what he was doing there. From the Middle East side, the Iranian state media, numerous of their state media outlets, it should be said, have basically said that there's no talks going on at all. One of the Iranian media outlets said that Trump is engaging in what they termed psychological warfare by putting out these posts. However, some of the messages and kind of sources reporting that we've had through Iranian officials has been different. We had, for example, Axios and Al Jazeera both reporting yesterday that senior Iranian officials had said that Tehran and Washington have been exchanging messages with Egypt, Turkey, and Pakistan involved in passing messages between the two countries. Axios also went further, suggesting that there could be a meeting of what they called high-ranking Iranian and American officials that may take place in Pakistan this week. Again, it's one of those where there's so much reporting that you can kind of pick anything you want to fit your priors.
And this is it. I think, you know what, that's a really valid point. This is why everyone is getting very, very loud on social media, and this is why I think this is also why the markets are so jittery, because you could be the biggest, you can be the biggest bull, the biggest bear, and you're finding headlines to match your opinion, right?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say, or actually a few things I would say, one is we need to remember the audience. I'm not entirely convinced that Trump tells the truth 100% of the time, if I'm being completely honest with you. I don't think that's a controversial statement these days. However, I'm also not entirely convinced that Iranian state media tell the truth 100% of the time. Probably not 50% of the time, if we're being honest. So, you can't say... I had a lot of conversation with people yesterday going, oh, well, the Iranian state media have said this, Trump said that, they've proved him wrong. Guys, I'm not really sure you can rely on them as a credible source, if we're being completely honest these days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, definitely. I think they're both as bad as one another. One thing I will say, well, that they've also been bad for a long period of time. Like, the Iranians have been very well known. It depends on what branch of the Iranian government you listen to. They say completely different things.
Yeah, and actually, we use the term. Sorry, I'm going off a bit of a tangent now, but we kind of, I do anyway, lazily kind of say state media. But you're right. Which state? Because some of the media agencies in Iran are kind of aligned to the government, and some are aligned to the IRGC. And those two kind of, well, at this point in time, they don't seem aligned at all, almost.
No, exactly. And also, as we said, the leaders of all of them have been decapitated.
Well, yeah, there is that as well. That's a slightly significant issue. But
there's a lot of people fighting for the microphone to take their post. I don't know why you would want to do that. It's beyond me at the moment.
But I do think, we will get onto that trade issue in a second, but I do think that, the market reaction yesterday to me made a fair bit of sense, because, you've got to think of where we came from. We came from a place where market participants were kind of coming into the day looking at it going, fucking hell, 11 o'clock tonight, this could really start to escalate and get very, very messy. So I think what we kind of saw was a bit of a combination of people who were taking a bearish view of proceedings, closing out their positions on the back of Trump's post, probably some fresh longs coming in to ride that rally that we saw in risk assets. But it also makes sense why we haven't really continued that leg higher this morning. The S&P future is flat, European futures are flat, because I think the market now wants a little bit more and probably wants to see some actual concrete steps in this direction.
Well, absolutely. And as we said, we don't know if it's bullshit. We don't know if Trump is just buying time to get more assets in place, and the market's aware of that. This is we did have a moment yesterday where you could argue, and people are rightly arguing that this is a great sign because it's showing that Trump is trying to make off ramps. But again, you're ignoring the fact that this could be all theatrics to just get assets in place to actually escalate further. This is why it's so difficult to price risk at the moment.
Well, exactly. The what you would, to coin a fancy term, you would say that the distribution of outcomes is still as wide as it was, this time yesterday. We're slightly more likely to go down potentially a de-escalatory path, but you still have all of those paths open. And, markets are going to struggle in that environment. Anyway, you better talk about these dodgy trades, otherwise we're going to have an hour-long podcast.
Yeah, just one thing. I think you did very well on the distribution of kind of outcomes. And again, I was talking to someone the other day, and it's like basically the tails are getting longer on this. Very, very well put, my dear friends. But anyway, yes, so the trade to smell. So just before, a few minutes before this Trump tweet, FT is reporting that 6,200 Brent and WTI futures contracts traded between 6:49 and 6:50 a.m. Eastern time on Monday. Bloomberg reports a further 1.5 billion in notional S&P futures also changed hands in that window. Trump's back down to post, whatever you want to call it, was 15 minutes later. Potential profit on oil positions is being touted in 20 minutes of being in the trade, estimated about 100 million plus. I've seen like half a billion being touted on the S&P trade potentially. Obviously, we do want to just quickly chat about central bank repricing in a second, but just one thing to flag on this. There is obviously no evidence that this is dodgy as fuck, but it does stink. And I know my way around a dodgy market, and I do know my way around dodgy trades, especially in commodities. This stinks, especially that time of day and whatnot. It could be a massive coincidence, but we have seen, as we saw on Polymarket and Kalshi, people within the administration doing significant trades just before big things happen. We also, if we remember rightly, remember that famous interview that Trump did in the Oval Office after he kind of just walked back some tariff news. And in front of the cameras, he pointed at 3 people and said, "Oh, great news today after that tweet I sent. He made $500 million. He made $250 million.
Oh, yes, he did actually, yeah.
And he made 300. So we know that Trump's friends are, are very big, investors and whatnot. And if you got and I'll be very honest with you, and I'd probably get slapped on the wrist for saying this, but if you were really in a position of power to do stuff like that, wouldn't you have a little nibble? I would. Obviously, I'm saying this with a podcast effect only. If anyone's listening, SEC, FCA, etc., the old bill. Peter Green.
Yeah, I think I'll save you from digging yourself into an even deeper hole.
That's definitely that deep, mate.
Well, yeah, there is a bucket and spade would do. Yeah, all I will say is, I've got no more insight into this than anyone else. We've all got the same futures volumes data on our terminals. It's very difficult to prove just from looking at volumes what people have done, who's done what, whether anyone has made any money. But all I will say is it is not a good look at all for anyone. No, I don't think anyone is good. Well, someone may come out of it with a little bit of money, but I don't think anyone is going to come out of it smelling roses. Let's put it that way.
It's a really bad look for the administration, capitalism as a whole. And we are pro-capitalism on this show. Otherwise, what the fuck are you doing trading markets?
Yeah, quite.
But one thing I will say is I saw some people said, "Oh, I could never do it. Yeah, that's it. I'm not trading anymore until Trump's gone." What a ridiculous thing. I think that's also a really bad assessment. Fact is, if you know that Trump is always looking to pump the market, and look, put it this way, he's not going to be doing stuff to send stocks shanking lower or tweets to shank stocks lower. That's not his remit. We do know the White House and Trump want all-time highs in stock markets. So, for people saying, "Oh, this was so obviously, this was always coming," of that. Well, in that case, if you think it was so obvious, we should have been long. You should be making a shit ton of money.
Well, exactly. And if you know you know the bias of the bloke you're trading against, effectively trading against, which is the president of the United States, then you can do two things. You can get all ranty and angry on social media about how this is wrong and it's not the right way to run a country, blah blah blah. Fine, have that view, don't care, but separate that from your trading P&L, because they are two very distinct things. They should remain two very distinct things. And I would argue if you're trying to trade your political views, you're probably going to be a less successful trader than if you approach markets more objectively.
Absolutely. And it's also why I think, perma bears and, fucking far right or even far left people are never really great traders, because you need to be able to take all kind of inputs into your kind of, your mind or your kind of trading brain and kind of price accordingly. But anyway, enough.
Do we want to do the Stirs thing tomorrow, given we have 3 minutes left?
Yeah, why not? But what we're going to talk about is the fact that Stirs markets may have got a little bit carried away, specifically the BOE, in my opinion. But there we go. Is there anything else today to come out that we should be watching apart from news headlines on PIQ?
Yes, there are a few bits and bobs actually. We promise we will do the Stirs thing tomorrow, because we just want to devote a bit of time to that rather than rushing things and doing it in a hurry. Today's all about PMIs, actually, setting aside the geopolitical headlines. We have data from the Eurozone due at the top of the hour in about 3 minutes' time, and then data from the UK due at 9:30 this morning. The composite metrics in the Eurozone, that's seen dipping to 51 from a prior 51.9, and in the UK seen dipping to 52.8, down from a prior 53.7. Two things to bear in mind with all of this. One is that the PMIs are the first kind of top tier data release that we've had referencing March, so obviously giving us a bit of a steer as to the initial impact of the conflict in the Middle East. The other thing to bear in mind, and anyone who was around during the COVID period will be well aware of this, is supplier delivery times. The way that the PMIs are calculated is that the assumption within the methodology is that if it is taking longer for a supplier to get their product to you, it is a sign that there is more demand for that product, and the PMI interprets it as a positive. Right now, the reason why supplier delivery times are longer is basically because supply chains are an absolute mess because there's a war going on in the Middle East. That's clearly not a positive, but the methodology of the survey will still treat it as one and could sort of artificially inflate some of the numbers that we may see, particularly in the manufacturing sector. So just bear that in mind before you take the data just at face value. Other than that, we've got the Richmond Fed manufacturing data out this afternoon. We've also got a 2-year note auction in the United States and a ton of central bank speakers too, including Fed Governor Michael Barr and BOE Chief Economist Hugh Pill, who of course is one of, if not the most hawkish member on the MPC. But that is pretty much a lot for this morning.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned about the PMI situation, because when that did happen over COVID, people lost their tiny little minds. And I believe it was actually, when I was talking to our dear friend, Gold BMW driving.
I think
it was me and him that were talking. Well, I think we were pat ourselves on the back. It was us and someone else. I can't remember who it was. That kind of realised.
I think it was Andy Bruce at Reuters.
Yes, it was. It was Andy as well. Yes, exactly. Oh, that's a very good point. I do need to give him a bell, actually.
The other thing with that, and this is going to be famous fucking last words, and I'm convinced it won't happen. But before anyone asked, yes, a PMI can technically go negative. That was the other outcome from that conversation.
Yeah, but this is like it's amazing how many kind of data points that we take, official data points, and when you look through the methodology, or when it's stressed, the methodology falls apart. Like we said, this is why, I'm going to finish on a high for Ryan. This is why ADP is better than NFP.
Fuck off.
The methodology of NFP is dire. But anyway,
and both of those can definitely go negative, as we've seen recently.
Exactly that. Well, Michael, shout out to you, my dear friend. Oh, it's got an alert saying it's someone's birthday today. There you go. Better give her a text. Or him. Right, no, it's definitely a girl. I've checked. Right, moving on.
Oh,
God. Michael, thank you so much for your time. As always, listeners, thank you so much. We hope we put a smile on your face and a bit of value into your day. Remember, keep an eye on the headlines. Do use PIQ for that, because we are one of the best out there for news aggregation stuff, and the platform is free, especially our new lightweight version, which you can have up on the side of your monitor.
Oh, sorry, actually, just on that.
Yeah.
Well, because we've run over, the manufacturing PMI in the Eurozone has just crossed. Print was 51.4, up from a prior 50 spot 8. I haven't read the press release, but I bet that's due to what we just said.
I'd be put it this way, I'd be positively shocked if it wasn't. But Michael, thank you as always. Listeners, thank you as always. Keep it tight, stay safe. Much love. We'll see you all tomorrow.
See you later.